Okay, if everybody's ready. Before we kick off, had a couple of queries just about handling arrangements. So we just want to be open about it. Obviously, there's only 2 of us here present this week, and we're a panel of 3. And then there was just myself here this morning. Rest assured, there is always going to be 2 inspectors on each topic. We've carved it up between us, and in the CMC2 note, it does give you the panel lead for that particular topic. So it's myself for noise, air quality and health this week and next week. But there is always 2 of us here. Inspector Ware this morning was up in our room on the live stream, so he wasn't physically present. He had an urgent matter to deal with, but he was listening in, and we do have a WhatsApp group, so he would have prompted me if there's anything he particularly wanted to ask. So I'm hoping that just gives a bit of comfort in terms of the proceedings. How we write it up, I mean, we're going to have to figure that out in our own way. We're all going to be here for planning balance and the closings as well. And we're all here obviously for forecasting and socio-economics. I was upstairs again watching it on the live streaming, because a lot of that touches into all the other topic areas. So I just hope, I just wanted to make that clear, because we're not sort of just disappearing off into the ether. We want to be an open, but if there are ever any queries or anything like that, just via the programme officer do ask, and we'll always try and explain. So any queries on that? No? Okay, great. Okay, Mr. Morehouse then.
Thank you very much. I was just taking instructions because I certainly wasn't aware of any issue being raised by,
I think it was just,
party, so.
It wasn't an issue, no one was sort of complaining so far as I can work out. It was just a clarification point,
yes.
So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I should say, Madam, it's perfectly normal in
yes.
large inquiries with multiple inspectors. I've come across it many times.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly I don't see a difficulty at all either.
Yeah. Okay.
Turning then to matters for this afternoon, I can see Mr. Ryan Densham is there. You are Mr. Ryan Densham, I hope?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And you're here to assist the inquiry in relation to aspects of the effects of noise on yourself and your family.
Yes.
We can see from the proof of evidence that you live at an address which is Royd Yate Lodge, and that's at Congsbury.
Indeed.
And so far as your association with that address, I think your proof of evidence says that your family association goes back to the 1940s.
Indeed.
You give a little bit of the family history, but essentially you've returned to that address in 1985, and you and your parents have lived in that area ever since, I think. So.
Yes.
Just so far as the location of where you live in relation to the airport, can you give an indication of that, please?
We are, as it says in the proof, 2 3/4 miles from the western end of the runway. We are actually directly underneath the airplanes as they come over, and we apparently are some 40 meters above the ground, when the runway being 187 meters, according to my Ordnance Survey map. Thank you.
I'm just going to work through your proof of evidence. You make, at paragraph 3, an observation about the, I suppose, the growth of flights over time and your residence at that address. Would you like to just describe to the inspectors what has happened over time?
Yes, originally there were just a few planes. They were noisier because the windows all rattled. But there were very few of them, and one lived with that, and we had to cope with that. What's happened more recently, as we get this continuous set of flights early in the morning, in the evening, and at lunchtime. I think the planes leave us, go somewhere, turn around, come back again, and go out again. And we have a little bit of respite during the mid-morning and during the afternoon. And then, of course, at night we have flights at all sorts of stages through the night. But the most active time that we have is really between 6 and 8 in the morning is the most active time, when it's flat out, really.
And when the airport is fully functional, back in 2019, what did that amount to? How many flights would you get in that period of time, do you think?
I don't add them up, because to do so makes me even more distressed than I already am, because it's totally blighting our lives. But we have had this glorious, glorious lockdown. But before that glorious lockdown, they were constant when the taking off in the morning, because the majority of them go west over us. I think sort of 3/4 or something like that. And really from about just before 6 o'clock in the morning, you get them constantly, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. It then calms down a bit, around about 8:30, 9, something like that.
And in practical terms, what is the effect when the aircraft are flying over you?
During the daytime, it brings conversation certainly in the garden to a halt. We hear them inside, but certainly in the garden to a halt. I've been sitting here this morning, I was being told 10 seconds or something. No, it's much longer than that. Much longer indeed, because when the planes start to come towards us, then we effectively get distracted, and I suspect it's probably more like 30 seconds, but I don't know, but it's a long old time that we have between the plane arriving and leaving our home.
And so you've described there being relative periods which were quieter. So I think you've described late morning and perhaps mid-afternoon.
Yeah, that's a sort of recharge the batteries and breathe a sigh of relief and enjoy the more peaceful time.
Okay. And you've described overnight flights. Your awareness of those overnight flights living where you are, how often are you aware of the aircraft in the night?
Most nights we are aware of them. I used to write the occasional complaint, but you just get a straight bat coming back at you saying it's all within the rules and regs. And it is very distressing if you actually have to sit up in bed, write down the time and everything, and then in the morning write a letter saying, I'm fed up. And when I reached my 70th birthday in 2019, I gave myself a little rule that I would actually roll over and try and go back to sleep again, because the distress of, it just took me right through the night doing that. So I try and go back to sleep and therefore don't record all the time.
In paragraph 4, you describe, I think the heading is particularly offensive night traffic. You describe, I think, regular times when you were aware of night flights. What sort of times are those that you became aware of them?
Well, all the way through the night, off and on. You get quite a lot of flights, it seemed to me, I'm having to go back in the memory now, 18 months or so. You get quite a lot of flights around sort of midnight, 1 o'clock. I expect there's a sort of spillover, I don't know what they are. And then you get 1 or 2 flights coming in early-ish in the morning, and then it's all merry hell from 6 o'clock onwards, really.
Those night flights and your awareness of them, it perhaps it follows from what you've said. You said you at some stages you were noting details of them, were you?
I was noting details of them, but I actually made a positive decision in my mind that it was so distressing that somehow you've got to try and roll over and go back to sleep again. Otherwise, I'd go into an early grave, I think.
And talking about the health effects on yourself and your wife. What are the consequences of this?
Well, my wife gets quite stressed because, of course, she grew up there in the happy days of her childhood. And it is very distressing to see this tranquility destroyed by all of this. So she suffered from that. I get pretty scratchy because I don't get a proper night's sleep. And certainly one of the problems we also have is people coming to stay. It's an embarrassment when they come to stay because they all get woken up. And during lockdown, we bubbled with some of our grandchildren to help our daughter, and we home educated them, which was a bit of a nightmare. But we did that, and I think if it hadn't been for the lockdown stopping the aeroplanes, it wouldn't have worked because the grandchildren get woken up all the time.
And so, from what you're saying, they would have difficulty, or there is difficulty if they come to stay with you because of the
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it doesn't really matter. There was an enormous amount of chat that I didn't really understand this morning about DB this and DB that. However quiet the aeroplane is, it wakes me up. So, there we are.
So far as you've said, it's an embarrassment to have people come to stay or visit. What impact is that having on your social life, your living?
Well, we don't really find it very easy for people to come and stay because of that. We used to do a variety of things in our garden when various sort of charitable events and things. There's no way we could have an opera in our garden. Absolutely none whatsoever. And indeed, for a short while after I'd retired, I became chairman of the Bristol Airport Theatre School, and we had a very important end of academic year event at our home when the students would perform. And we had people like Julian Fellows coming down and talking about what he was up to. We wouldn't be able to do that. Really, certainly we wouldn't be able to do that if we had continuous flights, which is what I am concerned about looking forward.
Now, we have heard about the airport providing assistance to people. Do you want to make some observations about your experience of assistance?
Yes. They wrote to us graciously telling us that they could give me 50% of the cost of putting in double and triple glazing, unfortunately up to a maximum of £2,500. And I think the first time round, I think they particularly wanted us to go to certain contractors. So we went to one of those contractors who was not at all surprised when I said, well, this is hopeless, because the cost was going to be tens of thousands of pounds to deal with our house, which is also grade 2 listed, so we'd had to get planning permission, so that would have been another cost. And I worked out that probably for the airport's intrusion on our life, which is what they do by flying over the top of us, they would munificently, as long as we paid 95% of the cost of it, pay the remaining 5%. And I didn't think that was very nice. And then, actually, since I put that thing in, I've got here a letter from the airport on the 13th of April 2021, where they reproduce this £2,500 offer. They also say, it is important to note Bristol Airport has a limited budget this year, with only £85,000 to be awarded for noise insultation treatments. I think possibly that typo is rather relevant. Noise insultation treatments. I think they mean noise insulation treatments. 85,000 probably would have paid for my home and not much more. And I wondered why they put that in. And I suppose because if they're directors of a company trying to maximize the profits of the company, then that's the risk-benefit that they say they're being awfully nice to us locals by offering us £2,500, but as long as they don't pay more than £85,000, then the benefit that they get from being such nice people is justified to their lords and masters overseas.
And what is your assessment on the impact of the value of your property on the current arrangements?
Damaged atrociously, from what I can gather. I mean, there was no... I was never wanting ever to sell it. It was a family home, and I hoped it was going to go on to the next generation. But the next generation is saying, look, Dad, if this airport is going to expand as far as it's planning to expand, and we're not even going to have those brief moments of respite, we don't want to live there. So, yes, I might have to sell it, or give it away.
And just going on through your proof of evidence, I think you've already made an observation about, I think, quieter aircraft and potentially what that means to you. Is there anything else you want to add about that?
They wake me up. That's all. The windows don't rattle, but they wake me up.
I think you've already told us, just working through your proof of evidence, about the Bristol Old Vic and the inability to host events now. What about other impacts on your daily life? Conversations, telephone calls, and the like?
It's telephone calls. If we get a telephone call when we're outside, we've got to go inside and shut the door, or else we can't have the telephone conversation because you can't hear yourself speak. So I don't know what our decibels are, but all I can tell you is that I can't have a conversation like that. And when people come and see us, we have to stop conversations when aeroplanes go over.
And again, this is the 2019, the pre-pandemic position.
Yes, yes.
That's without any intensification of use.
And the outgoing planes are higher, it seems to me, than the incoming planes, and they seem to have a noise which seems to go on for longer. The incoming planes seem to have a slightly shorter noise, but then, after they've gone past, most of them suddenly go as you get a sort of back thrust of noise coming back. I don't know what it is.
Okay. Just going on again through the proof that you've provided, you make some observations about pollution and your concerns about pollution.
Well, yes. I mean, we often smell the planes, what comes out of the back of them, and sometimes you get this sort of smoky stuff comes back out of them, and there is our vegetable garden, and I wonder what lands on it. And my wife, who's obviously been there longer, in fact, since birth, sees all the stones in the rockery have all gone white. What it is, I don't know, but she's convinced it's something to do with that. I don't know, I can't tell you, but we are worried about pollution. And of course, again, when we had the lockdown, it was glorious. There was a sort of sense of freedom of air. And so when we were all busily clapping for the NHS at 8 o'clock every week, there was that. We could hear it in the village coming up to us, and we were able to do it. I don't think that would happen if we had aeroplanes coming over us.
And your general sense of the development of this airport in your area, can you assist with that?
Well, the airport, as we know, is all in the wrong place. We're going to have lots and lots more cars. At the moment, actually, rather strangely, on every Friday afternoon and Saturday, and in the rush hour, it's stationary outside our house because of the traffic lights down in the village. And I suppose with all these more cars, it'll be even more stationary. We'll never be able to get anywhere. But as far as North Somerset is concerned, they're having to build masses and masses of houses and fill it up with people, which is what they have to do. Then if we overlay the airport on top,
This is
it's strangling.
housing development in the area that you live.
Colossal development in the area below us. In fact, I think North Somerset were wanting me to build on some of our fields, which I don't want to do. And anyway, I wouldn't want to do under the flight path. And we've got houses being built at the bottom of our hill. I think we're going to have the new doctor's surgery slap bang on underneath there. And then you've got all the housing in Yatton, which is colossal, and the planes go over the top of Yatton too.
Thank you. Now, I think you were here this morning, and I think you heard some of the cross-examination, I think, of one of the witnesses earlier on, and in relation, I think, to places of worship.
Yes.
Did you want to add anything to your personal experience of that?
It's a bit of an irony, really, but there was a sort of slight dismissiveness about places of worship when I sort of woke up to the complexity that I didn't fully understand. But I used to be the church warden at St Mary's Church, Yatton, which is the village beyond our village. And only last Sunday, when we were in church having the normal communion service where you have the intercessions followed by the peace, the lay reader did the intercessions, which are the prayers, at the end of which one says, "Lord, in thy mercy, hear our prayer." Well, an aeroplane came over in the middle of the intercessions, and this is Yatton, of course, a village beyond ours. And, of course, nobody could hear a thing in that church when he produced that prayer. So at the end, when he said, "Lord, in thy mercy," I said, "Hear our prayer," and then muttered under my breath, "because none of us can." And indeed, the rector at the peace made reference to it as well. It's a bitter irony, because Yatton is a village on beyond us, and you cannot hear the prayers of intercession when a plane goes over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Densham. I'm sure there may be some further questions for you.
Okay.
I've just got a quick question for you, sir,
Yes.
if that's okay. I don't know if it's a local term, but it's not one I've come across before. So you describe yourself, you said you get scratchy. So that's in your proof, and you said it today. And I mean, it's probably, I don't know if there's a local term. I don't want to guess and put words in your mouth as to what it might mean. We might have equivalent, I'm obviously northern. So could you just describe, what's scratchy to you, just so I'm clear?
Well, I'm a cheery soul normally, but I do get very irritated and grumpy. How about grumpy? Is grumpy a good word? Grumpy.
Grumpy. Okay, that's fine. Just so I was 100% as to what
Because
that meant.
it is a very distressing thing for me.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll hand you over to Mr. Humphreys now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Densham. I haven't got any questions. I understood scratchy, but that may be from where I come from. But thank you anyway.
Just me then, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next witness is Hilary Byrne,
Yes,
please. Thank you.
if you just take some time to get yourself set up, we're not in a rush, so.
Thank you.
Things you can't refute. Yeah. Scratchy.
Thank you. I take it by the light coming on that you are ready.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. And just to confirm, you're Hilary Byrne,
Yeah,
and you come to this inquiry as a resident of Cleve Village.
correct.
Sorry, Ms. Can you just speak into the
All right,
microphone? There is a
sorry.
knack to it, but thank you.
Correct.
Thank you. That's much better. And as such, you, I think, live directly under the flight path of the airport.
Yes, that's correct.
You have a degree in environmental studies,
Correct.
and you have also been a councillor for Cleve Parish Council since 1998,
Yep.
and the chair of that council.
Yes, I've been chair.
And you are the representative for Cleve Parish Council on the Parish Council's Airport Association, and also on the Bristol Airport Consultative Committee.
Yes, I'm chair of the PCAA since 2006.
Thank you. And so you've been chair prior to the 2011 planning application,
Yes,
and effectively have followed the developments, presumably since at least 2006.
yes, I'm quite knowledgeable on the history of the airport since 2006.
Now, the PCAA, the Parish Councils Airport Association, how many members, parish councils, does it represent?
Currently, 29. We've just lost one because we sent out our subscriptions. But that roughly reflects 50,000 residents.
And so far as the general view in relation to, well, actually, before I do that, I think we've circulated earlier in the inquiry a map or plan covering, showing the locations of the parish councils. In broad terms, where would you describe them being, the parish councils?
The parish councils cover a large area, so there's some in North Somerset, quite a lot near the airport. There's some in Bath and North East Somerset, and we have one in Sedgemoor district. Okay. So that reflects the size of the impacts from Bristol Airport. Okay. The PCA is a growing organisation. We grew at the last application, which went in at 2009, and we had 19 parishes for a long time. And with this application, which went in 2018, we grew substantially and we've gone up. And I would like to say that even in the time of the pandemic, this year we picked up another 3 parishes because they realised that the tranquility of the area was so wonderful, they would join us.
Okay. And so far as those councils, can you give an indication of the views of local residents that make up those councils in respect of the airport noise?
Well, airport noise travels a long distance, and the residents will all complain about different things. So, for instance, we have Timsbury Parish Council, which has residents particularly aware of them turning slightly over them, getting onto the flight path to start the descent to arrive. You have parishes very close to the airport, such as Winford, which you heard from, which they have terrific background noise, and they have arrivals and departures. And that's the same for Cleve, Congsbury, Yatton, and the area is really quite large.
And so far as the airport itself and its location, do you want to provide some comment on that?
Yes, I would. It is a very rural area. We have the area of national beauty behind the airport, and a lot of the parishes are within that setting. So the Chew Valley, which has a lot of impacts from the airport, are in the Mendip Hills and the area of national beauty, and I just don't think that's taken into consideration. The tranquility to the area is highly important. So we've always known that the area is loved, and we have a lot of visitors from Bristol. It's their local playground. They come out, they enjoy the Mendip Hills, the Blagdon Lake, and they cycle on the lanes, they walk in the woods, and they walk on Felton Common. And I think what's happening with the noise from the airport, it's not only residents who are finding that they've got no tranquility left, it's going to be visitors. And I think this is going to force people in their cars to drive further afield. I know certainly that I'm going to have to escape airport noise if it gets worse. I won't want to walk in our woods. And I think we will lose a lot of local visitors from Bristol and the surrounding area.
And so far
I think this is against the government's decarbonisation plan and North Somerset's active travel plan, which particularly state and encourage people to walk and cycle in their localities.
so far as what local residents have reported in relation to noise, can you comment on that?
Right. They hear not an average. This has been all said before, I'm afraid, but they simply do not hear an average. They hear an individual, a movement. There's a recognition that the aircraft are slightly quieter, but they are only a little bit less noisy. So this destroys the peace and quiet. Residents are particularly angry about the night noise in the summer months. They complain frequently about the background noise from taxiing and warming up. There is an awareness within the parishes when we meet, that no costing of the impacts of noise has actually taken place. And this indicates to us that the airport simply doesn't take noise seriously enough. We also recognise that the road traffic from airport generated traffic, this also affects gardens, the enjoyment and sleep patterns. But more than that, we recognise from what's going on today that if we have a high volume of night flights or an increase in night flights, this is going to lead to more car travel to the airport at night, because there simply isn't a lot of public transport available. So this will eventually, in turn, affect whether the modal split will be achieved.
Thank you. Is there anything you want to add in relation particularly to do with the night flights and the increase in night flights that's proposed?
Yes. I would like to go to a document. This is our original submission, which is CD 17.1, because I'd like to show some screenshots and a map of the impacts.
Okay. So 17.1, CD 17.1.
Yeah. And it's page, the first one is figure 1.
Figure 1 is that page 78?
Yeah, page 78.
Just wait till everyone is there.
Yeah.
So what is that showing?
Well, this is, first of all, let me point out that we tend to use only Bristol Airport data. So this is a 2017 operations monitoring report map showing the 51 dBl night contour. And you will see night complaints well outside that contour. That's all I want to say about that, because I don't want to get technical, because we've heard the experts and I'm not an expert.
You're not an expert on noise, but this is looking at the contour that's proposed and looking at the complaints.
Yeah, and it just shows the spread of complaints on noise. And I'd actually, if you just look across to the next page, 79, figure 2, This is a screenshot of the arrivals of night of 18th, 19th July 2018. And it shows that 17 flights came in till 3:50 in the morning. And they come in at very regular intervals. And this is between 23:30 hours and 0600 hours. And it is actually quite shocking. I mean, if you read it out, so I'll start, but I won't read it all. It goes 23:40, 23:45, 00:05, 00:30, 00:30, 00:40. I'll jump a few. 01:05, 01:15, 01:30, 02:15, 03:25, 03:50, and that's not quite all of them. So that is on a regular basis. And as we've just heard, if you're woken up once, it is exceptionally hard to get back to sleep again. I've actually shown on the next, if you scroll down on the website, figure 3, that's another example of flights coming in. And then I'd like to go to early morning flights, because you have to change screen because you have arrivals and departures, so you can't get it all on one sheet. So this is page 81, and this shows a flight going out with 04:10, 04:25 and 5:30, 05:30. And this is before the 0600 hours when the airport commences with a vengeance. If you're woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning, it is exceptionally hard to go back to sleep. And if you do go back to sleep, you are woken up at 0600 hours. So the request we are making today from all the parishes is that we want a reduced number of flights. If we can't have that, we want them to remain the same, but we certainly don't want any more. So if, right, Brendan.
Yeah. So far as any correlation between those flights and complaints, do you want to make any observations in relation to that?
Yes. So because I sit on the Airport Consultative Committee, in 2016, flights commenced early in the morning. There was a spike of complaints, and it was reflected in the Airport Consultative Committee records. So as I sat on the committee, I asked the airport, please can you try and take this early morning flight out? There's a spike, residents don't like it. And they said they would go to the airlines and request some form of action. Nothing actually happened. They probably did ask them, but they probably seek to influence, but nothing actually happened. And we ended up the following year with another one and another one. So they've actually increased. So it had no impact whatsoever.
Was the impression given to you that they had control over what was happening at the airport?
Well, the airport certainly knew, but what we didn't realise at the time is that the way the aviation sector works is that they approach an airline to come into the airport, usually probably two years before or a year before, and so they will have agreed the flight times a year before. So of course they can't change them because it's a done deal.
So you've talked about disturbance created and complaints made by residents in relation to that, which is set out in the PCAA document that's been submitted. Yeah. What about health effects on people? Are you aware of issues in relation to that?
We are aware of health issues from reports and the evidence is certainly growing. So we have highlighted in our addendum, which is CD 17.3, numerous reports on health impacts and under our health section. And I'm just asking you to look at that at another time. I'm not going to refer to it because I think we had in our first week, we had Dr. Tricia Woodhead speaking to the inspectors, and she spoke very eloquently and she explained the impacts very well on health. So I don't feel the need to repeat it.
Can I just check that core document reference? Is
Yes, it's CD 17.3.
I don't have it on the list on the website. We'll find out where that's gone to and make sure. I've got a note of it. Is there a particular page or is it the document?
It's health section.
Health section.
Yeah, and it's got an index.
Okay.
I've got that as a North Somerset Council planning document.
Right.
So I don't know. Anyway,
It's
That
a
may be
it's
where
a
it's been put.
PCA A PCA addendum. I thought, okay.
Okay.
oh, no, hang on, sorry. Maybe
We'll try and figure out where
one
that is and via the,
No, I haven't.
the programme officer and
Okay,
make sure
thank you.
I just need to make sure I'm reading the right one. Okay.
Okay, yeah, okay. No, I do understand.
No.
I'm assisted, I'm told it's 17.5. So,
Oh, right.
Ah.
right.
So that's a January 2021
Yes, response to
response.
the addendum document.
So that's the correct,
Yeah.
the right. Okay, that's fine.
And I think it's,
Well, we've got it, so that's the main
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, okay. So,
yes, do carry on. Sorry, I think we
Sorry.
have slightly sidetracked. What else would you like to say?
well, I'd like to make the point that last week Mr. Humphreys argued that people really valued their holidays. I think people really do value their holidays, but I think people also really, really value a good night's sleep. To have an undisturbed night's sleep is wonderful, and it's something you can't buy. You can't go and buy it. So we do need conditions to cover them and to really protect residents from more night noise. I can't stress it much. Well, I think you've heard that the value of a good night's sleep is up there, gold rated. So I'm going to go on to summer and winter limits.
Thank you.
And I'd like to take you to the 2019 Operations Monitoring Report, Table 13.
What documents is that in?
That's CD 14.7.
So this is Bristol Airport's annual monitoring report.
Yeah, that's right.
And did you want us to look at?
No, so this table shows why combining the summer and winter limits on aircraft.
Sorry, which table?
13.
13, thank you.
Winter limits on aircraft movements into an annual total is seriously detrimental to local communities. The summer limit is 3,000 flights. In 2019, there were 2,933 flights. In 2018, there were 2,975 flights. So BAL is at the upper limit of night flights in the summer months. In the winter months, the limit is 1,000. In 2018, there were 254 flights. So there's lots of spare capacity in the winter months. So if we take it on that basis, this will lead to another 750 flights at night in the summer months, because we just know they will transfer those flights to the summer when the situation is already dire. So we also know that the busiest period is 92 days. So if you divide that into 750, you get an extra 8 flights a night. Now, the screenshot I showed you, one of them had 18 flights on, I think. That will take it up to 26 flights a night, which is horrendous.
And these are over the summer months,
Yeah.
when people are...
When people have their windows open. So a movement limit, in our view, is entirely reasonable and relates directly to the source of the adverse impact. So we would like a movement limit retained in the summer months. I mean, that's what conditions do. They try and reduce the adverse effects of that development, and this is noise, on people.
And so far as those are night movements, we've heard about the shoulder period, which is the period that sits between the daytime and nighttime cap. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is 2300 hours to 2330 and 0600 hours to 0700 hours. As we've just heard, this is one of the busiest times of the day, and I shouldn't say day, night, because this is actually night time. I'd like you to turn in the same document you've got up, which is my original submission to the planning application, to page 85.
So this is
CD
17.1 again.
Yeah, that's right. And I have got...
Page 85, I think it was.
Yeah, page 85.
Just bear with us while we all
Yeah.
find it. Thank you.
It's 0.23 I'm going to on this page.
2.3.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'd like you to look at this complaint. It's an email, and it's a response to this period. And it's very interesting because it reflects the time at the Kongsbury Noise Monitor. And it basically says that if you're in a 57 dB contour, the LEQ is 62, it's well over 60. So it's that period of time, 6 o'clock in the morning, doesn't reflect the contour you're in. It's a substantial amount of noise. And this is why the LAQ, now that I've heard all the witnesses speaking about it, simply does not reflect the true value of noise.
And that's the response to the complaint.
To the complaint, yes, in a 57 decibel contour. I'd also like to say that we want a condition on this period. We know that the airport, we know from the last planning application that the condition said that the shoulder periods should have a maximum of 10,500 per annum. We thought that was too high at the last planning consent, but we had no influence. BAL has offered to reduce this to 9,500. Now, the situation is completely intolerable at the moment. It's dire. So we ask that this is reduced to the actual figure of the 2019 monitoring report of 8,371 to allow a slight bit of relief.
That's the nighttime noise you've covered and the shoulder period. What about daytime noise?
Well, we know there's going to be an increase in events. It will take tranquility away. if you average it out, it's going to be a flight every 3 minutes. As the North Somerset Council expert witness said, because they bunch up, it could be every 5 minutes. So there's not going to be much left for residents to 5 minutes between another flight is not very long. So as Ryan Densham just said, we're not going to be able to hold a conversation on the telephone, we're not going to enjoy our gardens, and I think the inspectors, you all know that. But I would like to say that we have looked at the Treasury Green Book, and page 1 of the submission, which is open, gives a whole lot of monetary values for noise.
Sorry, what are you referring to there? Page
91.
91, and that's of the PCAA submission, so CD 17.1,
Yeah,
page
yeah.
91.
I would just refer you to this because the Treasury Green Book does put a monetary value on noise, and it also puts a monetary value noise not just inside a dwelling, it puts it on side a garden, the residential amenity. So what we're saying here is the monetary value placed on the airport noise is simply not reflected in the noise insulation given. It doesn't adequately compensate for sleep disturbance or annoyance or enjoyment in the garden.
Thank you. And what about operations, the noise from the operations of the airport itself rather than simply the flights?
So we're referring here to ground and background noise. So we know the planning consent of 2011 allowed for 33 stands, aircraft stands. This is in Schedule 2 of the decision, and it's also in the description. We also now know that the airport has put in under permitted development rights for one further aircraft stand, which is now on the south side in Greenbelt, and that's planning reference 17/P/2360/PAI.
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
Yeah. 17/P/2360/PAI.
Thank you.
So under the 10 million passing consent, there would be 34 stands. We know aircraft stands cause background noise. We know in this application that there's a general phrase used, enhancements to airside infrastructure. But nowhere in the application does it mention or reference aircraft stands. So the parishes are just wondering, with the growth in Jet 2, are there going to be any more aircraft stands? Or if the fleet mix alters and there are more aircrafts kept at the airport to get to 12 million, where are these aircraft stands going to be? Are they going to be on the Greenbelt again? How much noise will they create? Will BAL use a full planning permission, or will they put in for permitted development rights again? Because we have no idea. And it wasn't brought up in the planning meeting. This is why the parishes are asking that permitted development regulations be removed on the entirety of the green belt at Bristol Airport. We also know that Bristol Airport uses permitted development rights to change planning conditions because it got the administration block on the green belt on the south side when it was conditioned to be on the north side of the airport and only 2 stories, and it's now 3 stories and larger. So we have great concern at the use of permitted development rights and how they are used. What it has done with the permitted development rights has actually caused terrific mistrust between parishes and the airport management team, because we keep saying, well, we would like to suggest somewhere else or something, but no, it's permitted development rights. You can't have any say. You can't have a condition on it. And so it's eroded trust with the communities.
Thank you. Now, turning then, if we can, to the position about the suggested changes of the aircraft fleet using the airport. What are the local residents' views in relation to that?
Well, the new fleet is obviously welcome, but it's only less noisy. I'm just going to refer you to the Operations Monitoring Report 2019 again, to look at in your own time, to look at the peak noise levels, because it gives peak noise levels and average noise levels, and it's just something worth looking at, please.
Do you have a page number for that?
I do. It's two tables, actually, tables 6 and 7.
Thank you.
This is
CD 1.
back to CD 14.7. And
Yes.
do you know the page number for table 6 and 7?
No, I don't.
Okay. So we're looking at pages 12 and 13, I think, for that.
Going back to your question on the new modernised fleet, the communities and residents have been expecting the new modernised fleet for many, many years now. So when we bring up a noise issue, they always say, well, don't worry, the modernised fleet's well on its way. It will be here. And we fully expected it to arrive to the early part of this decade, but it simply hasn't. And we know from York Aviation and the slower growth scenario, the fleet may only be fully modernised in 2034. We know under the faster growth scenario that it won't be hardly modernised. But we know from Table 3, Inquiry Document 18, using BAL's own figures, that in 2030, 27% of all flights will be the current generation. 27%. That's over 20,000 ATMs, which works out at over 55 noisy flights every day, when we were previously told that this would be a thing of the past. That's 55 a day. So if we divide that per hour, it's one every half hour. So this is BAL's own figures. So we've got to the stage where I'm not sure we really believe all their forecasting, because it's changed so much. But the ultimate thing is that trust between the airport has just gone again. It's just eroded. It's been building up because things just haven't. The last planning application and the development has changed considerably. The area, the tranquility, and impacted on all our lives.
I think in your rebuttal statement, you look at predicted commercial air traffic movements for growth to 12 million passengers.
Yes, I do. That is, if people want to get it up, PCAA stroke W12 stroke 4, para 1A and B.
Sorry, repeat that again, sorry.
So
PCA.
stroke W12 stroke 4, para 1A and B. Basically, what my proof is saying is that if there is going to be 75,340 annual commercial air transport movements at 12 million under the core case, we request that that is a limit, an annual limit, and to stop uncertainty of figures and to stop more noise for the community, poorer air quality, carbon. It really is essential now that we have a limit on air transport movements. I'd like to point out that there are some new modernised flights here at the moment at Bristol. There's a very low number. I think it came out from in forecasting 8%. But even in that 8%, an aircraft can take off. A new modernised aircraft can take off, but it may not come back directly back to the airport. It may go to Edinburgh. It may go Bristol, Edinburgh, Paris, Edinburgh, and then back to Bristol. And other flights will come in and out. And so we don't get 4 neo-modernised planes coming in and out all the time, although they're based there. It's the rotation. So and I think this is because every airport wants a new modernised fleet, and so they divide them round so the airport can say, oh, well, they're coming, and we have got some, but they divvy them around.
Okay. What about the airport itself, the runway and matters like that?
Well, the airport runway is one of the shortest in the country, so this means that if the larger planes are going to come in, which I'm not sure they can do, because I'm not sure they could take off because the airport runway is too short. The point I'm trying to make is that if we're going to be making best use of runways in the future due to the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis, we want less noise, we want we want better air quality and less carbon. We actually could have 1 large aircraft movement rather than 3 smaller ones, and that would be really highly efficient. So we know that Exeter's got a big runway, and we know that Cardiff's got a big runway, and this is the way to go. We've got to look at making a best use of a runway according to taking passengers on holiday, but also the benefits of reducing carbon, air quality, and noise.
So that's a feature of the location of Lulsgate, the Bristol Airport?
Yes, there's nothing we can do about the runway. And we wouldn't want to do anything about the runway either, because it would be changing the area into a more urbanised area from a rural area. Emirates, by the way, is at Cardiff partly due to the runway, as well as having a tax incentive.
Okay. Now, I think in your PCAA role, do you want to comment any further on the impact on local people?
Well, I would just say that enough's enough, really. Yeah. I would like to say that we do have a very clear view in terms of planning conditions. We do know what we want, but we do seek a dismissal because enough's enough. So we believe that a condition should be set, an annual movement limit should be set. As Bal has stated with certainty that that's the number of flights at 12 million. We want to retain or reduce the summer flights, but we certainly want to retain the summer and winter movement limit.
Sorry, you want to, these are the night limits
Yes,
that you're talking about?
yes, the night. The shoulder period movement limit is reduced to the 2019 level, which I've just referred to. We also would like a limit on positioning and other movements of 10,040. This is stated in table 4.1 of the BAL passenger traffic forecast to the addendum, CD 2.21. Positioning and other movements is quite a large number at Bristol Airport. So you have to add that on to the commercial fleet to know the true number. You just add them together. But positioning and other movements are highly disturbing. And the other movements is general aviation, helicopters, and helicopter training.
Are there other conditions that you think are important?
Yes, I think because we've got houses quite close to the aircraft stands of 38 and 39, it's essential that the current restrictions are kept. The aircraft need to be towed, not to use their engines. It will just simply be dire to live there otherwise. As I've said just earlier today, the permitted development rights on green belt land must be removed to avoid creeping growth in the number of aircraft stands, which are big generators of background noise, and for other reasons too, which I'm sure we'll come on to in the inquiry. I know BAL is proposing a new night contour condition. I've read it in the BAL noise proof of evidence, point 474. I'm going to read this verbatim. BAL have proposed that the area of the 55 dB LEQ 8-hour nighttime noise contour area limit is limited to 6.8 kilometres squared for 2030. This is also to be reported in the annual operation monitoring report as well. Now, the parishes believe this is a very, very weak condition. It doesn't actually resolve the night flying issue. It does not define the number of movements at all. We know from what I highlighted in the complaint that the shoulder period, we have between 15 and 20 flights going out in a busy summer month time at present. We know that the contour level was 57 decibels. We know it gives more noise of at least 60 plus decibels. We have been living in the 57 decibel contour for years. We've been there since 1984, and our contour level has never changed. What has changed is that the air transport movements constantly increase, and this condition is exceptionally weak and simply will not protect residents without a night movement limit.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add before concluding?
Yeah, there's just one point really, and this was in BAL's opening statement, point 326B, and I'm going to read this because I found it very upsetting, because it recognises that noise does have an environmental impact, and we think it has a very significant impact. Bristol's airport's location in a rural area with low population density means that environmental impacts associated with the proposed development are modest when set alongside a very significant package of mitigation measures. The PCA disputes strongly the claim that the impacts are modest and that the mitigation measures put forward will protect the residents. The appeal should be dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be some questions for you now.
Thank you. Mr. Humphreys.
Ms. Byrne, thank you. Just a few questions for you on what I think are just certain parts of your proof of evidence. Before we get to the proof of evidence, I just want to ask about PCAA. And you helpfully, in the proof, tell us a little bit about PCAA and your involvement, and that you've been, I think, the chair now since 2006.
That's correct.
And I think very much, my understanding is, involved with the running and the administration of PCAA.
Yep.
Now, just before the planning application was determined, the officers produced an officers' report. I think that was probably in late January last year. Yes?
Yep, that's correct.
And PCAA, along with BAN-NC, but I won't ask you about them, commissioned a legal opinion from a barrister, didn't they?
Yep, yep.
And it was clearly written after the officer's report was published in late January, and it's dated the 4th of February. Now, we have it, I don't need to ask you what it says in detail, but it was clearly written, wasn't it, to influence members. It advises members on potential grounds of refusal, and it tells them about the risks of judicial review if they were to approve the application.
I'd have to read the letter again, but I'm sure you're right there. But can I just correct you on one thing? There was actually another organisation involved as well. There were three groups who wrote that letter.
I'm happy to understand that. Just at the beginning of the advice, I record it saying I'm instructed by what I'm referring to as PCAA and BAN-CC, but if there's another one, I may have missed it, but I thought that's what the advice said. And after the 4th of February, it found its way into the hands of members of the planning committees. It was obviously intended to do. It was written to them.
Yeah, I mean, we circulated it to all the district councillors.
Right. That's helpful. You didn't think to send it to the airport?
No, we didn't send it to the airport. We did send it to North Somerset Council, I think, but I'd have to check my emails to do that.
I certainly don't understand, because obviously I don't know much about it, but I don't understand it was sent to the council officers and then distributed to members. My understanding, it was sent to a number of members and through them the officers got hold of it. Is that right?
We certainly sent it to all the district councillors. Yes, we did do that. But I'd have to check my emails, but I think I sent it to Richard Kent as well.
Okay. Certainly there was a point where officers became aware of it. Do you remember when you sent it to members and the officers?
I'd have to go back through my emails.
Why was it not sent to the airport? It obviously was very material to the decision. It was trying to influence the decision.
The airport certainly doesn't send us everything.
To ask you whether the airport sent you everything, you sent it to members. You didn't send it to the airport, although they did get hold of a copy much later, shortly before the decision. Why wasn't it sent to the airport? It was clearly very material.
We don't have to send things to the airport. We can send anything we want to district councillors. They're our councillors.
Okay. And clearly the intention, for the reasons you've given, is that members would have it because they're your members, but the airport, the applicant, wasn't, save by chance as it turned out, going to have access to this. Why was it secret?
It wasn't secret. It went to all the district councillors.
Yeah, it was secret from us.
I think, Mr. Humphreys, that you have a lot of information which we've never ever seen and we will never see. And that we could say that you're being secret.
Does the PCAA not believe in transparent, open, fair government, that when a decision is going to be taken, clearly an important decision, that the applicant should have a chance to see the things that have been put to members? Is that not fair?
I would say that the PCA are exceptionally open, transparent. All that letter went to all the parish councils. I don't think we had to send it to you because we were trying to influence the district councillors, and we admit that.
Thank you. We'll move on to another topic. Noise. Forgive me, I'm going to ask you some questions on noise, but I've asked Mr. Fumicelli some questions for a considerable period and Mr. Vaughan questions for a less considerable period, and you're not, in fairness to you, you don't hold yourself out to be a noise specialist. You're talking about experience, and I understand that.
That is quite correct.
And that's perfectly fair. That's why I'm just explaining.
Yeah. No, I do understand.
In your evidence, so these will seem like rather kind of discrete, non-joined up points, and that's because they're discrete, rather non-joined up points, I'm afraid. In your paragraph 6.7, you talk about, of your proof, I think you called it a significant instance described in the local press, and there's a footnote 26, and if you follow that as I did, you get to the Chew Valley Gazette. It's not a CD document, I don't think it needs to be, but in fairness, I think we can agree that that's not really a noise issue. I think, as I understand it, it was about an air crew that in some way lost, I think it's called lost situational awareness or something of that thought. I can't remember what the CAA term is, but it wasn't a normal landing. They'd simply done something wrong and came in from the wrong direction, didn't they?
Well, it was a noise infringement in one way, that people were so scared in their house that they ran outside because they thought the telephone mast was going to be hit by the flight coming down from Glasgow.
Yes. I suppose my point I'm making, it wasn't a normal flight. Something had gone wrong.
Something had gone very wrong.
There was an air safety investigation.
Yes, that's
and
correct.
Things like that of something that went wrong.
Yes, and we never, ever found out whether what the recommendations were the CAA. The airport never told us what was in the report. And even though the management team told me to write to EasyJet, I wrote 3 times to EasyJet and they never responded.
And Another discrete point, you took us to CD 14.7, and I think you took us to page 21 for a point. And this, yeah, 21 and 22, this was the night quota usage data in the
Yep.
in the annual report. And we can see there the usage during the summer period and the usage during the night period. And clearly the night noise contours that we've been looking at and the various other things are all related to the summer period, aren't they? The 92-day summer period, it's sometimes called. And it's worth the inspectors, therefore, just understanding, isn't it, that those levels of noise or annoyance and so on that we're looking at in that data for the night is not typical for the entire year, that actually for much of the year, as we can see from the numbers of movements, the numbers of movements at night are less than a tenth of those during the summer period.
I think you're missing the point, though.
I might be, but can we just deal with my question? Okay. For much of the year, in fact, the noise and the events and the disturbance is not what we've been assessing during the summer period. It's significantly less than that, less than a tenth, in fact.
It may be, but you're still missing the point. 92 days is a long time, and it's continual for those times. We admit that the winter periods are much quieter.
And so as not to mislead you, I think those data, so summer, I think there includes the 92-day period. I think it extends beyond it. I think that's one of those things where the year is divided into two halves, summer season and winter season.
But the summer season is 7 months and the winter season is only 5.
Well,
in airport terms.
Yes, put that aside for the moment. I was just not wanting to mislead you by making you think that the 92-day summer period, all of those movements were in that period. Clearly they're not.
Okay.
Fine. And then your CD 17.1, you took us to, I think, page 85, PDF page 85, and some data there. And the point you made, you reproduced an email, and the point you made was, look, here's some monitoring data, and this is within the 57 contour, but this shows levels in the low 60s. But obviously the reason for that, as I'm sure you appreciate, is that what you've got reflected here is the noise levels not over the 16-hour period, but the noise levels just in those 2 hours.
Well,
I think
that's the point I was making.
Yes, exactly. But in the social surveys on which the correlation between dose and response is related, they're asking people not about how disturbed were you between this hour and that hour. They're asking people generally about, right, looking at the day as a whole or the period, the week as a whole, how disturbed were you by noise? And that's where the correlation comes. So you can't simply pull out a noisy period and say, well, that shows that in some way people are more disturbed during that period. They're disturbed by a whole period, a day or a week or 92-day period.
I think we're actually saying we're disturbed all night.
All right. Clearly, on that basis, if one had looked, say, slightly later, as other witnesses have said that the sort of mid-morning period, you would have had there an LAEQ for that hour typically that might have been below 57.
I doubt that very much, because we're getting now on average, and I'm talking about an average here, that we have a minimum of 8 flights an hour coming in and out, and that can go up according to the time of year, and whether it's a Saturday or Sunday. So you're looking at 12 flights.
But if the 57 is an average, there will be periods that are contributing which are above the average. There will clearly also be periods which are below the average.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you came on and you made some points, and I may have misunderstood, and forgive me, about Jet 2. And you asked about the need for extra stands. I mean, the important thing to note, I suppose, to start off with by Jet 2 is Jet 2 is not more flights. It's just a different airline.
No, I appreciate that. But one of the things that this application has not stated anything on is aircraft stands. So, as chair of the Parish Council Airport Association, I feel I have a duty to ask this question: are there going to be any more aircraft stands under this permission if it's granted to 12 million passengers? If so, where are they going to go, and whether they're going to create more noise for residents, and is it going to be by a planning application or permitted development regulation? Because it has major impacts on the community.
And the answer is no.
So we can have, like in the last planning consent, that there are no more aircraft stands going to be required.
And
so we could have that as a
condition. I've made it very clear, there's nothing in the application, as far as I'm instructed, there's no need for additional stands. There are sufficient stands.
Well, that's reassuring. So we could have a condition on that, please.
Fleet mix. You made points about the proportion of new generation aircraft, and you said there was constantly talk of modernisation of the fleet, but there has been modernisation of the fleet. There's constantly modernisation. Every few years, the new generation aircraft become the current generation aircraft, and new generation aircraft appear. And that's why, as several people have said over time, the aircraft have got quieter.
No, that's not quite correct. There is a slight modernisation of plane. Aircrafts are incredibly expensive to buy or lease. And the DFT has shown that once an aircraft comes into a fleet, it is generally within that fleet for 22 years. And I think that's a standard piece of information. And we know that at the 2003, 2005 master plan, that the new generation were coming in then. And we've had those, so we've been told that we would have a new fleet. And it's not materialised for one reason or another. And I can understand why it hasn't materialised. Because, A, they're highly expensive. B, there's a delay. And unless the other aircrafts are actually coming to the end date, they do not like to use that.
Ms. Byrne, we clearly are going to disagree on this, but we can perhaps agree that two of the dominant airlines at Bristol, that EasyJet is probably the dominant airline, have two of the youngest fleets in Europe.
Well, Ryanair's desperately noisy, and we're longing for it to be upgraded to the Boeing Max. And you have to remember that what you've given us in this chart, table 3, comes out to an old generation flight every half an hour, 55 flights, 20,000 movements. And it hasn't been brought out into the inquiry till I brought it out now. It's a hell of a long time to wait for less noise.
Yes, they clearly are, and we've acknowledged some older aircraft. I'm going to move on, otherwise we're just simply going to get bogged down. Your section 7 is on health. So I'm not going to ask you technical questions. We've got the our health expert next week, but you do raise a point about, in your paragraph 7.1, about COVID and variants being brought back and so on. Obviously, currently, there are some travel restrictions to some parts of the world to control COVID, but in terms of the forecast, we're looking well ahead, aren't we? We're looking to 2030, dates like that.
We are looking forward.
And yes, certainly there will be some local people currently that will wish to travel, and of course there is the potential for them to pick up COVID abroad, but that's really nothing to do with expansion, is it? That's just to do with the current pandemic.
I think there is a fair fear in the community that if a COVID variant comes in through the airport, then it could affect the local community. And in that sense, they are frightened. That doesn't really answer your question.
All
We
right.
are looking forward.
Residential amenity, your section 8, you deal with availability of jobs for local people. That's not really a noise topic, but I think it was one of the items that was identified that you would be talking about today. The only point I suppose I was going to ask you about, you express concerns, your paragraph 8.2, about automation.
Yep.
Obviously, in a sense, automation is an issue, isn't it, that will arise with or without expansion. Automation is not caused by expansion. Automation is just one of those things that happens with productivity over time.
Yes, I do agree with that, but the automation will alter future job numbers.
Yes. And, I mean, we had some debate about this last week, and I think actually we ended up in agreement with the council's witness, Mr. Ciro, on jobs and therefore the correct rate of productivity growth, labour productivity growth at the airport. And does that sort of satisfy you at all, or do you just take a different view entirely?
I really don't think the jobs will be as great as the airport thinks it will be in the future. So I do disagree slightly.
And then runway length, I was slightly unsure of your point here. On the one hand, you seem to be suggesting that it's not possible to have larger aircraft, and larger aircraft would be preferable because you'd have a smaller number of larger aircraft. But on the other hand, you seem to be saying to me that you didn't want the airport to change to have larger aircraft.
No, because I think nobody wants Somerset, North Somerset, to become more urbanised.
Mm-hmm.
You have to remember that we've got the Mendip Hills directly behind. It's in the setting of the AO and B. It's got Felton Common. It's got the Goblin Combe Woods, which is an SSI site. It's got the Corporation Woods. It's surrounded with natural beauty.
Yeah.
So we don't want that.
No. But all the aircraft types in the fleet mix, certainly Mr. Brass's fleet mix, he drew attention to some errors in this respect in Mr. Foley's fleet mix, but all of the aircraft in his fleet mix, including, if necessary, XLRs, extra long runway 321 Neos, would all be able to fly from Bristol Airport's runway. They all have that performance.
Well, if you say they do, with a full load and full fuel tank, because will that mean that they'll be very noisy then with the power takeoff?
Well, I think the characteristics of the aircraft are the characteristics that we've modelled and you know, will be reflected in the contour. Just moving on slightly, conditions. I wasn't going to ask you a lot on this. You clearly have a number of views on conditions. We don't agree with you, obviously, with all of those points, but are you going to be here for the session at the end of next week?
Without a doubt.
Yes, okay, well then I suspect rather than asking you questions about your views, it may be better to just leave that discussion till then.
Probably.
All right. Ms. Byrne, very nice to finally speak to you, and thank you very much. No more questions.
Thank you. Do you have any re-examination questions?
Just on one point, Mrs. Byrne, you were being asked about effectively legal advice, and which I think you've suggested was lobbying local councillors. Just to not that there's any concern about the contents of it, but just to make it clear, I wasn't the barrister instructed in that matter, so that everyone...
Mr. Morehouse, you missed out on that set of instructions, I'm afraid. I have no comment on that, but no, we have the advice, it's in, we know who it was. I'm just always a little bit discreet about these.
Of course, and I'm grateful. Mrs. Byrne, though, just from the point of view of what was sent to councillors, it was sent to all of the district councillors.
Yep.
So some of those were presumably in favour of the development and some against the proposal.
Yes, that's right.
And people voted accordingly?
Yes, they voted to how they felt or what they thought.
And presumably they would have had the... Well, how far in advance of the meeting were they given the advice?
Oh, I'd have to actually go and look up the date of the letter.
In your opinion, would they have had sufficient time to get their own advice from the council, or other legal advice should they have wanted to?
I think it was sent at least a week before. They had at least several days.
It can't have been sent a week before. It's dated Tuesday the 4th, and the meeting was on Monday the 10th.
Well, that's...
Do we want to bring it up and check this while we're sitting?
Yes, it's CD 1910 or something like that, I think. It's CD 1911.
I'm not sure I can see this one.
Oh, sorry.
No, I can't see it on...
Yes. So, and this can be checked, I think.
Yeah, 1911, it's dated 4th of February.
Thank you. So, just...
So that's, yes, it's not... that's fine.
It may be, I mean, these are all matters of record, but my understanding of the planning position is that 4th of February the letter's sent, 10th of February was the first vote, which was
The 11th.
18 against the proposal, 7 for, 1 abstention. And then there was a second vote on the 18th of March, 18 against the airport, 2 for and 3 abstentions. So I think that's a matter of public record as to that. We can perhaps look into that and agree it if need be. So letter sent 4th of February, 10th of February first vote, 18th of March second.
Yes, I mean the second vote, madam, was they had voted in principle to refuse. It was to decide on the precise reasons for refusal. There was exactly the same officer's report, but as you say, it's a matter of record.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm just going to have a chin wag with my colleague here.
Madam, if I may, sorry, just before you do that, because I suspect this might help you in your discussions, that we've managed to push back the cleaners by 15 minutes, so we can stay in here until 4:45. I'm just telling you now because it might be relevant, but if it isn't, then I apologise.
I'm not sure Mr. Henderson wins a prize for that submission.
Sorry, just having a natter here. Okay, I think, although I appreciate the cleaners being pushed back, I think I'm quite tired myself, and it's probably not worth starting examination in chief of Mr. Williams. I know he's probably keen at the fact that I've been listening patiently all week. I think it'll be cleaner to do it in one hit. Mr. Humphreys.
Yes, whatever you prefer. We're obviously more than happy to start, but I can see the logic in what you're saying, so I'm very happy to do that.
I mean, what I don't want to do is, it's quite a long cross-examination period because we've got obviously two advocates to do that, so I don't particularly want to start tomorrow unless examination in chief is very, very speedy and efficient, but you've been true to your time so far. Yep, sorry.
I'm anticipating being quicker than Mr. Taylor, clearly, and quicker than the 1.5 hours, because, again, it's difficult to estimate when you go second as to how long it's going to be.
Indeed.
I'm sure Mr. Taylor will cover probably 99% of the matters that I would have cross-examined on anyway. So.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll kick off tomorrow with evidence in chief from Mr. Williams, and we'll take stock as to where we get to. I think we have got a bit of spare capacity next week, so I'm not too worried. I presume Mr. Williams is available next Tuesday.
I think so. I ought to just check.
Yeah.
I think work on the assumption that he is.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Okie dokie, well, thank you everyone for efforts today. We'll finish and we'll resume tomorrow at 9:30. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.